Good day. I have with me Connie Mulder. He's the head of research at Solidariteit. Solidariteit is taking 4 cases to court regarding vaccinations, compulsory vaccinations especially. Connie, can you please explain to us what the cases are that you are taking to court?
So we're primarily focusing on 2 at the moment. It's the University of the Free State's vaccine mandate that implies that every single employee as well as student who wants access to campus needs to be fully vaccinated. And the second one at the moment is the CSAS, which has actively done lockouts against our members based on the vaccination status. So from Solidarity's point of view, our position on vaccines is public record. We've been released several reports that state we think vaccines are safe and effective. We think they work very well in reducing hospitalization and death, less well, but still at reducing symptomatic COVID and transmission. However, we're also against mandatory vaccination from the very start, based on a couple of factors in the workplace specifically. We're of the opinion a blanket approach, which basically says everyone must be vaccinated regardless of work circumstances or individual risk circumstances, is not something that can be justified. And this is echoed by the Department of Labor's directives, which state explicitly that having an approach that just says everyone must vaccinate is anathema to getting a safe workplace, which is the spirit of the law, at least, is it's a cooperative effort between employer and employee to ensure that we've got a safe workspace. From our perspective, mandatory vaccination should be the absolute exception, not the rule. And if you're going on like certain employers in South Africa, you're trying to elevate the exception to the rule without doing the hard work necessary to create a safe workplace without basically breaching bodily integrity and all those other rights. Secondly, Secondly, we're also extremely worried about the impact of mandatory vaccination on the success of the vaccination program. Quite frankly, South Africa has a very low vaccine acceptance rate, and people who hesitate are hesitant about side effects, saying they don't know enough. They're worried about long-term side effects, and they're worried about efficacy of the vaccine. Now, this will not be answered by a mandate. This will be the opposite of what you want to achieve, is now forcing people to take something that they're unsure of. In South Africa, in any case, we're sitting at the majority of adults who have got it, but 40% of the population is fully vaccinated. And if you're looking at young adults between 18 and 34, 6 out of 10 aren't vaccinated at the moment. So if you're the University of the Free State and you're saying you cannot get on campus unless you're vaccinated, then you're excluding the majority of your students, realistically. And what we've seen in other countries is a vaccine mandate hardens resistance and militarizes it almost, with massive anti-vaccine protests and anti-mandate protests in other countries. Those were countries that had 20 to 10% of the population not vaccinated. In South Africa, with 60 to 70% of the population not vaccinated, I think we'd be naive if we don't expect similar protest action, especially at university campuses, which has traditionally been a hotbed of protest action in South Africa. And that's why, if we go this route, if we're adamant on forcing vaccines once, we're going to scupper any chance of a long-term solution that is sustainable. COVID is going to be with us for a very long time. It's going to become an endemic illness, which we'll have to handle on a most likely on a yearly basis. And there is a very real possibility that we might need some more public health interventions in the future. But if we're going to take the shortcut now and do a short-term gain in forcing people, then in 2-3 years, when we need to get boosters in arms once again to ensure our hospitals aren't too crowded and overflooded, we would have hardened and entrenched the resistance to such an extent that there's no way that we can get public buy-in and the necessary trust to actually handle this illness. We're just creating a us against them situation rather than us against the virus. And this is why we're of the opinion vaccination is going to basically kill any chance of a successful vaccination program in the longer term.
What is the research available that you base your case on?
So we've done extensive research on international best practice regarding vaccines and vaccine mandates. And the first question we asked, quite simply, is mandatory vaccination a precondition for a successful vaccination program? Meaning, can you have a successful vaccination program without it or not? Because it's quite a big claim to say, well, we need to do mandatory vaccination, otherwise we won't be able to get a successful vaccination program. And what we found is the opposite, that the minority of countries that have successful vaccination programs mandated it in workplaces specifically. Not even healthcare workers were mandated in a lot of these countries. So that means there's no correlation between the success of a vaccination program and mandatory vaccination, which is this is a measure that's not going to achieve what you think it is. It's not a shortcut to a successful vaccination program. In fact, the opposite might be true. The second thing that we researched then is quite simply what might be the effects of it. And that showed through social studies in Denmark specifically, and New York, and all of those, that vaccine mandate entrenches resistance, hardens it, and politicizes the debate regarding vaccination and illness. Now, this is something that we don't need. We don't need more polarization on the COVID debate. We need less. And for us to successfully handle COVID in the longer term, we need to depolarize this debate, and a mandate is going to achieve the exact opposite and then scupper any long-term plans. The last one is then just Omicron has changed the game significantly. We've got this focus on vaccination rather than immunity, and that's not stroking of best practice internationally. The whole of the European Union uses the EU COVID digital certificate, which entails either having a negative PCR test within the last 3 days, which is I don't have COVID at the moment, a positive PCR test within the last 6 months, which is I had COVID 6 months ago, so I should still be immune, or then a vaccine certificate that says I'm fully vaccinated. Now, this makes sense, especially that we should start focusing on natural immunity a lot more, because vaccines just mimic natural immunity. It doesn't do anything else. It's basically gaining a portion of natural immunity at a fraction of the price, which means you don't run the risk of going to hospital or being on a ventilator, being permanently injured, or dying from the illness. You're basically taking a much lower risk for much of the same benefit. In South Africa, however, we've thus far widely disregarded natural immunity as part of the conversation, which is weird. We're sitting between, Prof. Shabir Mahdi estimates between 60 to 80% of South Africans who've had COVID. So that means we've got a massive amount of people who would be immune at the moment, and we need to adjust our vaccination targets accordingly to get rather set immunization targets and say we need to have a certain level of immunity to ensure our hospitals aren't overflowing, aren't too crowded, and that people aren't dying unnecessarily. I think it's important to remember we can't legislate this illness away. There's no regulation that's going to make COVID disappear. It's going to be with us for a very long time, might be the rest of our lives. And the only regulations that we have would be to ensure that we can handle it, not to erase it. It's not going to go away. Illnesses traditionally don't bother too much with regulations. And that says rational regulations would be, we've got a massive amount of immunity already. We should already be very close to herd immunity just based on the amount of people that got sick and recovered. Our vaccine targets can be drastically lowered. And that's where a mandate that comes in and says we need a 100% vaccination target is not really in touch with the reality post-Omicron that says we need to re-look at how we handle this.